You're listening to the Wanderlust Swingers podcast with Aussie hosts Cate and Darrell. If you're curious about exploring your sexuality or the swinging, hot wifing and non-monogamous lifestyle, you've definitely come to the right podcast. Or maybe you just love travel adventures. Either way, we share our personal, sometimes juicy, sexy stories as well as swingers club and event reviews, interviews with other sassy people, and of course our global swinging adventures. We try to bring you a look into the diverse lifestyle that the swinging and non-monogamous community has. We hope you enjoy. Now let's get into the episode. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Wanderlust Swingers podcast. I'm Cate, I'm your host for this evening, and I'm joined actually in studio, I use the term studio very loosely because welcome to my office, with a fabulous friend here, Mr. Dutchie, who is obviously a Dutchman from the Netherlands. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Cate. I am delighted to be here. Long-time listener, first-time guest.
It's really funny actually having somebody on the podcast physically here in person. Normally it's a Zoom call. So this is actually lovely because I imagine editing is going to be a breeze for me. Today we are going to be talking about Euro swinging. So I'm going to title this Dutchie Talks Euro Swinging. We're going to be talking about everything about swinging in Europe. We're going to get Mr. Dutchie, his take on their journey because, of course, Mrs. Dutchie is absent today. We do love her, but unfortunately she was unable to join us tonight. But a shout out to Mrs. Dutchie. And we're going to talk about cultural differences, approaches here in the Netherlands, in Europe in general. So we really hope that you enjoy the episode. We're going to go off on tangents as we like to do. But before we kind of crack on, let's talk about personal experiences. If you want to share with us what drew you to the lifestyle, why are you in the lifestyle?
Oh, great question. It started actually maybe 10 years ago when Mrs. Dutchie came home after a party and she confessed to me, "Hey, Mr. Dutchie, I kissed a girl and I liked it."
I don't think I actually know that. I thought this journey was, you know what, I'm not going to butt in. Keep going. This is actually a little bit new to me.
Pre-story to the story. So she felt guilty because she had kissed a girlfriend and she was expected me to maybe be angry or disappointed for her kissing someone else. And I was actually very interested and curious about what happened. So I didn't feel that her kissing another woman was a threat. So I didn't feel threatening. And then we talked about, hey, what happened? And talked about bisexuality and her being bisexual. And then we talked about exploring that part of her person some more. Talked about it, and then we gave some room for it. And she actually started to have a couple of dates with some ladies. I was okay with that. And it was a couple of years later that we just happened to see an ad for a swingers club. And that triggered a conversation between the two of us about, hey, you know, what would it be like if we would go, and are we okay with this?
We get this question a lot. If your partner comes and discusses something with you, sometimes people are exploring and, you know, looking into the lifestyle themselves, you know, researching, listening to podcasts maybe for some time before they approach their partner. That's obviously one way that it might happen. Yours was a little bit different. She came home, I'm just going to fill in the blanks, maybe had a couple of cocktails, getting a bit flirty on the dance floor or something like that, kissed a work colleague or kissed a friend. And you were open to it. I mean, if you were to give somebody advice about how they can be accepting when their partner comes with that information, because sometimes I would imagine you could kind of flip your lid and maybe become a very emotional conversation, but you obviously were very cool, calm and collected, and I'm guessing a little bit excited. So any advice for people out there if they were in a similar situation, how you remained so loving, open to having the conversation?
Yeah, I think it's about recognizing the first emotions you have and then giving a place to those emotions, but don't let yourself be led by those emotions and think about, okay, so what actually happened here? How important is it to us? What are truly the things that are important in our relationship? What's the difference between the rules that society expects from us and the rules that we want to set for ourselves in our own lives?
Which we will be digging into soon because we are later going to be talking about some stigma in society. So that's a really nice lead in. How long ago was that first club visit?
That was about 7 years ago.
7 years ago. Okay.
Yeah.
If you guys were going to explain your approach now, because you started kind of having maybe Mrs. Dutchie was going out and enjoying some ladies, then you went to the club, now you're maybe dealing with couples, same sex, opposite sex. How would you express your approach now? How do you like to meet other people? What would that look like for you guys? And I use the term sociosexual a lot on the podcast. If you're not sure about what that means, listener, generally it means that maybe you like to have more of a social connection, pants on, pants off friends.
Yeah, so our approach today is maybe not even that different from the first time that we went. So we both enjoy sex, and we also happen to really love exploring more sexual experiences with other people. I think even before our first visit, we felt at least at a certain level comfortable that we would be able to explore this with other people, and we still do that today. In our experience, the best sex that we've had is with people where we also have a great emotional and mental connection. That's really the best of both worlds.
Random follow-up question. Have you purchased more sex toys both for him and for her now that you've been in the lifestyle in the last 7 years, would you say?
Yeah, I think so. It's much easier for us to talk about sex and then to just go into a shop or online and buy stuff. So we've purchased the womanizer, right? I think another brand is Satisfier, which is the best thing since sliced bread.
Which is saying something for a Dutch person because you guys love your sandwiches.
It's really the best toy ever.
You just mentioned before that you like exploring. So have you been exploring sex toys on yourself? Is that something that has come into your own play in the bedroom, or even on a personal level? Maybe you've purchased your own sex toys for self-pleasure.
Yeah, we've purchased some, but to be honest, I haven't found any particular toy that really did it for me.
Oh.
Yeah.
Throwing it out there then for the listeners, if you have a favorite male penis-owning sex toy, please send us an email. Let us know what Mr. Dutchie should buy next.
Yes, please.
Let's put you on the hot seat. If you've been a long-time listener or a listener at all, you know that I like to put my guests on a hot seat, ask them some slightly personal questions. So let's get carried away with yours. And let's talk about sex. When did you have your first experience with another person? And can you explain the sensation, how you felt? And a follow-up to that is, do you still have that same feeling now versus maybe 7 years ago?
The first time we went to the club, we went to the Fun4Two in the Netherlands near Rotterdam, which is a huge club. I think we went on a Saturday night and there were maybe 200 couples visiting. And on the dance floor, we met another couple our age, and we immediately had a great connection with them, talking and dancing. We had so many laughs, so there was immediate connection. And at the same time, we also felt a really flirty sexual connection. So after lots of drinks and a short trip to the jacuzzi, we went up to the one of the playrooms. And that's where I had my first experience with another woman while in a relationship. And that was absolutely incredible experience. It was so hot and so sexy, and not just for myself, but also being right next to Mrs. Dutchie and her being involved with me, also with the other guy, but also with the other lady. And that was just an amazing, mind-blowing experience. It was so hot and so sexy. And at the same time, it was also the first time I saw her actually having sex with another man. That felt a bit weird for a couple of seconds. So I do remember the first time that I actually saw it, that was a kind of a weird mix of emotions.
Like what, like excitement, feeling, did you feel guilt? Did you feel possessive? What did that, like, oh, I should be feeling upset about this, but I'm somehow not, like confused?
Yeah, so I think a mix of a little bit possessiveness and confusion, but because there was so much respect between the four of us, that feeling went away really quickly. And just joy of seeing your partner have a lot of joy. That is just great.
Yeah.
It's my partner. I want her to be happy, and I saw her in a very happy position.
When I was writing the show notes for this, I was, of course, reflecting on some personal stories. And I don't know if you've actually listened or heard the story of our first time swapping, so I'll share it with you. But we were in one of our favourite clubs in Australia, which is called Our Secret Spot, and it's in Sydney. And they don't anymore, they used to have a sex swing in one of the rooms. And we found this couple that we kind of connected with. We went upstairs. For some reason, and I don't quite remember the why, but it was going to be that Darrell was going to play with her. Myself and her partner were on the bed just kind of watching. So I don't know quite how we ended up in that dynamic. And the reason I don't remember that is because I have it kind of pinned in my memory of the first time he slid his cock into her pussy. Like I remember sitting back with the partner And there was a lot of like, are you okay? Checking in. You know, she was in a swing. We were on the bed and the swing kind of sat right next to the bed. And I remember Darrell just about to insert his cock. And I remember having the conversation of like, is this good? Like, are we okay? There was this very almost a stepwise process to it. But I don't think you'll ever get that first realization and those feelings of that confusion and like, actually it's quite hot, but it's also very confusing. And I don't know whether you'll ever get that first moment back again. That was our first experience. And so I didn't actually play that night at all. It was completely Darrell playing with her and me watching with the other partner. So it's kind of a slightly unique perspective, because sometimes I think that in the lifestyle, we might take things a little bit easier if we're also slightly engaged with somebody, less kind of running through things in our head, less cerebral. But in that moment, all I could be was cerebral. So yeah, it's a little story about us. Okay, so let's talk about cultural differences. Just before maybe we get into this, can you give us a rundown? You've swung in the Netherlands, and I know that you've been to some other locations. So maybe can you just give us a rundown of where you have visited clubs or events?
Sure. Most of our experience is in the Netherlands, but we've had the opportunity to visit 2 clubs in the UK. We've been to the Boudoir in London. It was a great experience. And recently we joined the hotel and club takeover that you organized, co-hosted with Beth Hoppers. And that was, I think, the best organized event I've ever seen in the lifestyle.
And that's just because you're sitting in my studio right now that you're saying that, yeah? And you've been to events in Belgium. I know you visited a club in Italy. So let's talk about maybe the Netherlands. You're Dutch. Obviously, you were born here. You've grown up here. How would you describe the cultural attitude towards non-monogamy? And then maybe outside of that a little bit to alternative relationships or just generally like the LGBT community. Do you think that people are more accepting in the Netherlands than maybe what you see on other locations? And obviously, if you haven't lived in them, maybe just from your thoughts and opinions on mainstream media, what's happening around the world. How do you feel like the Dutch population accepts who we are sitting in this room?
Well, I'm here in the podcast as Mr. Dutchie. I'm not here with my own name. So we are still in the closet. The fact that we're in the lifestyle is a secret to other people. We've only shared this with very few intimate friends. And that's because we see a risk of slut shaming, especially for Mrs. Dutchie. And that might impact either the friendships that we have or family relations or maybe how we can perform at work. So I would say non-monogamy, even though you read a lot about it right now, we fear it's not as accepted as we would like to see it.
So I live in the country as a foreigner. So my perspective, very different from you growing up, right? So when I walk around the Netherlands here, what I see in summer, I see women being topless on the canals. And I think, wow, body positivity, cool. I see pride flags being hung year round, regardless of whether it's Pride Month or not, just year round. And I see acceptance there. So from a foreigner's perspective, I come into the Netherlands and I'm like, I can be whoever I want to be. But that maybe is a little bit different to what you're saying, which is I think there's an undertone maybe on friends and family accepting who you would be. Like, would that be ever something that you would want to come out with? Do you feel the need to try and maybe in a couple of years, is that kind of on your 5-year plan? Like, hell yeah, if in a perfect world, I would love to come out.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think we are already getting more open about it. So we are telling more and more friends about it. Yeah, maybe also in the Netherlands, we might be more open to it as compared to other countries or cultures, but still not to the point that we feel that it's not have any negative effects on us. Probably continue to care less and less about those negative consequences and just come out.
I have a follow-up question to that, because this is my personal behavior when I travel. When you travel and you maybe are going to another country and you're going to a nice weekend away or something like this, or visit the country or visit vineyards or whatever, or you're at a resort, wherever you are, do you feel yourself becoming completely more open? Like, I know you went to Vegas a little while ago. Are you sitting in a bar in Vegas just like going, hell yeah, this is who we are, because you kind of feel that's where you can truly just almost not give a fuck? Or do you do that, or is that just me?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, yes. So if I meet strangers and there won't be any repercussions.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. And yeah, we dropped that bomb.
Darrell used to take the piss out of me. He'd find me sitting at the front of a bar in Bangkok or something, having a conversation with a couple of people. I'm like, yeah, hell yeah, I'm a swinger, and he's like, why do you go on vacation and just live your best life? All right, so let's compare some of the different cultures. You mentioned before that you have been to the Winter Wonderland party, so I'm gonna directly compare the Netherlands to the UK right now, just because they're close. It's a close flight away, and we can take the piss out of them if we want to. So in your experience between here and now visiting 2 clubs in the UK and attending an event, what do you think is the noticeable difference between the culture and approach to swinging here versus maybe in the UK? Did you notice anything different?
Yeah, I noticed some differences. So most of our experience is with the Fun4Two club in the Netherlands. And it's our favorite. The way to meet people there is really on the dance floor. We like dancing. We also like the electronic dance music that is being played. So that's really the way that we typically run into people, have a chat, and then see if there's a connection or not. Both our visits to the UK, we've noticed that approach for us does not work. Might be us because we're super tall, freakishly tall Dutch people. So maybe some people in the UK might be hesitant to approach us or to respond to us. But in the UK, we noticed that the connection happens more maybe in the sitting down at the bar or in the sitting down area, or which was great in the event that you organized before the actual club visit with the room crawl or the drinks at the bar beforehand.
Which is interesting because every time I hold an event, quite often we hire DJs. And some of them can be very expensive. And when I don't see people dancing, it personally makes me feel like I've failed as an event host. Because for me, the element of dancing, like for you, it's about connection. For me, it is a way of saying, oh, these people are having fun. If people are sitting around and having a conversation, there's a part of my brain that goes, they're doing that because the music's shit or they hate the atmosphere or they're not dancing or whatever. The reality of that in a lot of different locations is actually they're making connections, and it took me a very long time to realize that. So that's a really interesting perspective, especially around the Winter Wonderland, because I thought that people moved to the playrooms very quickly at that particular event. And I know you and I had a conversation and said, hey, actually, it was maybe a little bit slower than what you've seen in, say, the Fun4Two. So yeah, interesting kind of cultural differences there. If you were to go back to the UK, now knowing these cultural differences, would you now approach things differently as a result of that, or would you kind of continue your behavior and hope that people also want to have a dance, but maybe if they don't, go, okay, and we'll kind of have a chat?
If we go to the UK, we'll probably try to invest a bit more time in connecting with people at the bar area or before the party starts instead of on the dance floor itself. Well, the other way to connect to people is just by going to the playrooms as a couple and see who you meet there. That has also been successful with us. I mean, it's a more direct way, slutty way of meeting people in a good way. But for us, it also we've had a great time in the boudoir that way. So our motto is: if we go to such a party and we start with the 2 of us and we end with the 2 of us, we already had a great time. And anything on top of that is just a bonus.
Well, we're going to talk about events now. So we're going to push back on the hot seat and we're going to talk about events, because I know that you have been to some exclusive events here, and we're going to talk about how maybe some of the cultural differences exist, but maybe how some of the intertwining exists in sex positivity space in general. You've attended some events here in the Netherlands. I know you went to Belgium, kind of more higher end, curated, specific guest list. Curious about those events, what you think worked with those, if there's any interesting rules that maybe some of our global listeners might be interested in.
Yeah, we had the pleasure of going to 2 different parties. One was called Big Little Secrets in Amsterdam. The other one is called Caviar de la Nuit in Antwerp. And both of them are, well, exclusive in the sense that you have to submit your picture and then you get accepted or not. It's also a different type of event as compared to a swingers club. So I would characterize it more as an erotic dance party than a swingers party. The dress code is different from the clubs we've been to in the Netherlands. Women are expected to wear lingerie and the guys, they suit up. So it's a very gendered type of dress code.
Is that from the minute that you walk through the door, or is that from a specific point in the evening? So do ladies turn up in a robe and then just kind of derobe and they're in their lingerie, or how does that going to play out?
Yeah, that's from the start. From the start of the evening, women are in lingerie, men in suits, and there is a dress code on top of that. So, for example, if there's a certain color that you need to adhere to, that's also important. In both of those events, there were some playrooms available, but most of the people don't make use of them. So either there is an after party in the hotel that people go to, or they just have a great time dancing, and that's it. Maybe some kissing. So the focus is much more on the erotic part of it, the flirting and the dancing, and not as much on the sex as you would see in the swingers clubs. At the one hand, it radiates the air of exclusivity, right? That's also how they market themselves, as say, oh, it's only the most beautiful people, and the way the event is organized and the club is decorated and the quality of the DJs is just extremely high quality. At the same time, it also feels discriminatory in the same way. So I also feel bad for people I believe are beautiful that do not get selected. And obviously, why would you select on appearance, right? So part of it is, I think, age, but also looks. We were lucky to get accepted. We had a great time, but at the same time, it also feels a bit weird. And with those erotic parts, more maybe for some people, it's about being seen. I also think that quite a share of people are not actually swingers, but they just like to go to an erotic party and dance around in their underwear. Well, of the clubs out there in the Netherlands, I think you have your swingers clubs, but there's also more the clubs that are more like a sauna, like Steamworks in Arnhem. And then of the parties, I think it's more blurring between the swingers parties, erotic parties, and dance parties. So we also like to go to music festivals or music parties with some really nice electronic dance music, some great DJs. But there's parties like Crazyland, Wasteland, or Bitch, which blur the lines between fetish, swinger, erotic, and dance parties. And you see overlapping crowds. So the reason that we got to know Caviar de la Nuit was actually by coincidentally meeting some other swingers at a regular vanilla dance party. We were kind of joking at the dance stage, looking at a couple of people saying, hey, those people might be swingers, because we saw people kissing each other. And we just went up to them and asked them, hey, are you swingers? And they said yes. So we found our tribe. And that's how we kind of found out about the other types of parties that exist.
I think there's something you said about dance parties and the overlap of freedom. I mentioned to you before about going to another country, going on a vacation and feeling like you can be yourself and more free, right? Sometimes at festivals, music festivals, dance parties, you get, immersed. That's what a good festival immerses you in the atmosphere, correct? And I think that's maybe why some people are more inclined to then go, you know what, I'm out in public, but actually today I'm just a number. There's nobody here keeping eyes on me and I can truly be who I want to be.
I totally agree. It's like what happens at a Dutch dance party stays at a Dutch dance party.
I love that. That should be the next tagline on the 2024 Mysteryland advertisement. Interesting side fact is that we actually got rejected from one of these parties. You mentioned to me about a party and it looked great and I think we were here for the weekend, so I thought, fantastic, let's see about going. And Darrell and I applied and we got rejected, which was an interesting sensation. It's not something that's ever happened to us before and it feels cruddy, and I think it feels probably the same to be rejected by a company as it does to maybe be rejected by a couple on a dating site. But we got rejected, and so I think that's just one of those things where it happens. It does make you reflect on whether or not you submitted shitty photos or whether you didn't say the right thing or could you have another go. I don't know. I'm curious whether they actually do let people reapply for a second time round. That would be an interesting...
Well, you can try with a different email address, different name.
There you go. Maybe I should try it with some AI. It can help me out there.
Well, we felt so bad when we heard about you not getting accepted, because when we actually went to the event itself and we just looked at the people and were like, well, this would be perfect for you as well. You're not different in any way then.
Maybe they saw we were smart-ass Aussies and they just went, you know what, keep them out. Keep the riffraff out of the club.
They don't want Australians there.
Maybe. So we're going to talk about New Year's, and you kind of dropped the bomb on this a little bit beforehand because I know you've seen the notes that are sitting in front of you, but putting you back on the hot seat. And you mentioned earlier about liking to form some connections before you might move on to play. But I happen to also know you on a personal level, and I also happen to bear witness to you playing on New Year's. So let's talk a little bit about that play. So I know on New Year's you had multiple play sessions. One of them maybe slightly planned-ish, and then one of them a little bit more spare of the moment. So talk to us about maybe changing and being a little bit more diverse in your approach. And I'm curious whether or not you are just, and I'm saying you in the broad you because Mrs. Dutchie isn't here right now, or whether when you go to a club, maybe your mindset changes a little bit and you turn from sociosexual Mr. and Mrs. Dutchie into slutty McSluttenstein Mr. and Mrs. Dutchie when you go to a club. Let's talk about that.
New Year's Eve was really the best evening ever. So we started out meeting this most amazing couple on the dance floor, and we had a great talk, and we were flirting. And one thing led to another, and we just had a great play session with the four of us. And that was more of the social, sexual type of play session.
And I want a timeline here just because I really want the listener to... You got to the club at 9, you lined up, you entered.
Right.
When was the first play session?
Oh, I think that was around half an hour after midnight.
12:30.
We met this amazing couple around 11 at night. So we had a great talk and a dance. We had some champagne. We had a countdown until midnight and celebrated the new year. But we were also like, okay, we feel a 4-way connection here. It's time to go upstairs.
How did you make that move from dancing on the dance floor to moving to the playrooms?
It started with a kiss. Mm-hmm. So I felt I really had a connection with her, but she also had a connection with Mrs. Dutchie, and Mrs. Dutchie had a connection with the gentleman. So at a certain point, I just asked her, can I kiss you? Mm-hmm. And then she looked at her gentleman to check, hey, is this okay? So we did a 4-way consent around kissing, and then we kissed on the dance floor. So that was already the test that we know, okay, we have this level of intimacy, we trust each other, this will end up in a play session. So that was already before midnight. So I think the four of us couldn't wait for 2024 to start because we were like, okay, we just want to be...
We're just dancing now, waiting for the countdown.
Waiting for the countdown. It was a countdown to something else.
You were walking around the club, forwarding all the clocks, moving them forward just a little bit to try and get into the play session sooner.
Exactly.
Don't you think it's interesting, though, those 4 words, can I kiss you? I mean, we talk a lot about how hard it is to make that next step, make that next connection. But sometimes 4 simple words can really be the start of something super fun and sexy and free.
Yeah, and consent is sexy. And sometimes consent is verbal, right? Can I kiss you? May I kiss you? And sometimes it's more implied, right? That you kind of, with eye contact or the way you move, you kind of take the next step. But in any way, do it with consent. That's how it worked. We had an amazing play session with the 4 of us.
In the tantric room?
That was not in the tantric. Actually, it was so busy. I think Fun4Two is one of the biggest clubs in Europe. Mm-hmm. It was absolutely packed.
Yes.
500 people. When we went upstairs to the playrooms, most of the playrooms were actually occupied. So we had to search for quite a while to find a spot that was open. So we had one of those nice smaller areas where we fit with the 4 of us. And we had a great play session. We exchanged our contact details afterwards. Mm-hmm. Went back to the dance floor. Around, I think, 2 a.m., I looked at Mrs. Dutchie and I asked, hey, would you like to explore some more? And at that moment in time, the people who were still dancing on the dance floor, they weren't interested in meeting new people anymore. So we decided just to go up ourselves to the playrooms again and see whether we could find some
action.
Some action.
And this time, did you because I know the reason I keep bringing up the tantric area, I know that's your favorite area. Did you revisit the tantric area? Was it less packed this time? What did you see when you were kind of moving your way around the club? Or in fact, did you indeed do a big circle of the playrooms and very pervertedly look in at all the action and then decide which was the sexiest action area?
Yes and yes. Well, the tantric area is really our favorite place in the whole club. It's a beautiful area to the side that you can reach through a long corridor with some Eastern Orient style, very quiet space. It's beautiful. But we know from experience that area gets full really quickly. There's like 10 different beds there and they fill up quickly. So we already knew there's no opportunity for us to go there. We'll go there next time. So we went kind of walking around to see, can we find some people that appear interesting to us and see maybe we can just lie down next to them and see maybe we can have some eye contact or some other contact and see if this would work. But actually walking around at that moment in the evening, we didn't really see any particular places where other people were playing or people that we felt a connection with. So we decided just to pick a spot in the open and started to play with each other.
But strategically in the open, though, because you're expecting maybe there's another Mr. and Mrs. Dutchie who are also pervertedly walking around the playrooms, yeah? That maybe see us, like the look, and then come and engage?
We saw quite a lot of very interesting couples also walking around looking for places. So that's another recommendation for people. How do I make a connection in a European club? Just go to one of the more open play areas. Start to enjoy each other. And then, other people will walk by. And it's just a matter of time before other people will say, hey, that looks interesting. I'm just going to sit next to them, enjoy my own partner, and then maybe we make a connection.
I know that you don't know their names. I know that because we had a conversation at breakfast the next morning. So this is where, some people in the lifestyle might go, my God, you had sex with people, you don't know their backstory, their name of their dog, you don't know their name. Like, how did that come to be? That's why I called you Slutty McSluttenstein on New Year's. But how did you make that connection, I guess? So you're playing with Mrs. Dutchie, a couple comes and lays down next to you, they start engaging with each other. Run us through, just for the listeners that maybe don't know how this might play out, how you ended up having sex with them. Like, what happened?
The Fun4Two has smaller and bigger play areas, and this was one of the bigger play areas. It's right next to a corridor that lots of people have to walk through in order to get to another section of the club. And we just sat down at the side, and I started to eat out Mrs. Dutchie, which I really enjoy. We were playing at the side of the corridor, and at a certain moment, a couple walks by. And they saw us, and there was a small pedestal next to the bench where we were having sex, and they started to play on this pedestal. She was lying down, sucking his cock, while Mrs. Dutchie was lying down, and I was eating her out. So I had a partial view of what was happening right next to us. I thought, hey, that's interesting. So Mrs. Dutchie had a great orgasm. And I said, hey, it's time to change positions. So then we moved closer to the other couple. I bent her over. And at that moment, the couple was fucking doggy style. We started to fuck doggy style as well with her face together. Mm-hmm. So the ladies could kiss each other. Yeah. And that was kind of also a test of, okay.
Do they want to be alone or do they, yeah.
Exactly. We already knew that we were attracted to them. So that was a great connection. And then it was literally almost like universal sign language of the guy making this movement of swapping. I nodded yes. And then we got some condoms and then we swapped.
Wow.
So that was...
And then you finished. And at this point, what did you do? How did you end that play session? Like a handshake? Thank you very much. A hug? Like, what did you guys do that was brilliant. Thank you so much for the orgasm. And we're going to go back to the dance floor.
A hug, definitely.
Yep.
But I was also looking at Mrs. Dutchie, and we're kind of already laughing and joking because this was such an incredible experience of actually meeting such a great a couple, but not exchanging any word. Mm-hmm. We kind of thought, okay, so what do we do here? And I thought, okay, should I ask them their names? Or, we haven't said anything. So the only thing I asked is, hey, can I ask you something? Where are you from? And they said, we're from Greece. I said, all right, great. Have a great evening.
And that's just so you could go home and put the Greek flag up on your kind of collect them all board. Is that correct?
We have this scratch map at home, and friends think that's about countries we visited.
That's actually really funny, the scratch map that people use to say where they've traveled to, and you're using it for who you've had sex with around the world. I love that. Where did Darrell and I sit on that map? Are we Australian? Are we now Dutch?
Australian.
Okay, yeah. We're Australian on that map. Okay. If you haven't had anybody in Singapore, we can maybe fill that gap too, because we lived there for like 5 years. I'm just saying.
Great, yeah, definitely.
if the map needs more
Croatia.
Scratching. Which it brings me up to a really interesting topic, which is based on your experiences, like what advice would you give? So if we've got people who are listening from America, they're listening from Australia, they're listening from the UK, what advice would you give to individuals who want to come to Europe? And a lot of the questions that I receive are around nationality, they're around language barriers. You just described a very non-language, consensual play session. So how would you describe that? I mean, and first of all, how many languages do you guys speak? But what is your experience with that? Do you mainly speak Dutch in the clubs, different language? Do you mainly speak English? How does that all play out?
Yeah, we speak Dutch or English. Most of the people that we connect to on the dance floor are Dutch. It's just easier in your native language to connect to. My recommendation for people visiting the Netherlands would be to check out the website of the club. Typically, it has great information about how to behave, what to wear, what to expect. And there's many different clubs in the Netherlands as well, and they have their differences. They have also their different expectations of how the evening flows. So I know a difference between what you have in the club we typically go to and other clubs is that there's a certain dress down moment. So people start the evening in their dance clothes, but at a certain point in time at around 11 o'clock.
Some mystery song plays that Darrell and I still have no idea. We just look around and say, are all the Dutchie people changing into their lingerie?
Yeah, and then the next half hour people go to the lockers and they dress down, which really works for us. It's a way to reduce the barriers of getting to the next step. So sometimes you're meeting a couple and you have a good conversation, but you're both kind of hesitant to ask, hey, are you ready to go to the next level? And then having this situation that people change into lingerie and boxer shorts, that makes it easier to take the next step. So for us, that's completely normal, but it depends on the club. So some clubs have this and some others don't. Some clubs are couples only. Some other clubs in the Netherlands, they do allow single men. So it also depends on your preference, what you like.
Would you say it would be difficult for an English-only speaker to come to the clubs here in the Netherlands?
Oh, not at all. Both. We've mentioned Fun4Two. Another big one is Fata Morgana near Amsterdam. Super easy to connect to people. I think in most of the nights that we visit our club, a large percentage of the visitors are actually from other countries.
We saw that on New Year's, right? I think you said that it was probably the most diverse grouping of people on New Year's that you've seen so far.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, if I count the nationalities that we've talked to or otherwise have engaged with.
Have scratched off your map.
Yes, exactly. It's it covers India, Mexico, US,
Greece,
Germany, Greece, UK, Belgium, of course, France, Italy. It's from all around the world that are visiting these clubs. So I think people visiting have no problem.
And would you recommend that, say, maybe an English-speaking person would walk up and just say, hey, I'm sorry, do you speak English? Say they see somebody, they think they're attractive. Hey, I'm sorry, do you speak English? Would that be, if you were to meet somebody, maybe you and Mrs. Dutchie on the dance floor, a couple comes up, how would you like to be approached if they were English-only speaking?
That would be no problem. Most people in the Netherlands, they speak English and they have no problem at all with people approaching them in English.
Yeah, as we get ready to wrap up here, let's talk about your future predictions and perspectives, I guess. So we spoke about maybe how you perceive the Netherlands, how I as a foreigner perceive the Netherlands, which I got to be honest, does sound like rainbows, lollipops and candy canes and really positive vibes. You know, when I think about places we've lived, Croatia, Singapore, Australia, the difference in how I perceive the people of the land. And, you know, here I honestly have to say, like, I really feel in my core that anything's accepted. And I think Darrell really has to remind me that that's not the case. You know, he has to remind me that not everybody accepts who I am, either as a bisexual woman or as a non-monogamous woman, you know, that it's just not as accepting as I think it is in my little non-monogamous bubble. But can you maybe talk about the future? Do you think that we're heading, especially with social media, with things like that, with trends, bisexuality, trans, gay saunas, all of this, do you think that we're heading in a direction that's more accepting here in the Netherlands? Do you think that we hope the future lends itself to maybe, you said earlier in the episode that, you know, ideally you and Mrs. Dutchie would like to come out to more friends, more people around you. What do you think? What are your future predictions?
I think the trend is towards more openness. I think also probably we don't know how lucky we are in living in the Netherlands, right? We only know our own context and we see the downsides and the upsides, but it's difficult to compare to living in other countries. So I think you're right that in the Netherlands, people are probably more open and accepting. What we've seen over the last couple of years is more openness and acceptance of men being open about their bisexuality or being bi-curious. I think when we started, that was really almost non-existent in the lifestyle. But now we see that in meeting new people, it is kind of part of the conversation. It's right, okay, what are your preferences? What are your boundaries? And you see more and more men saying, hey, I have no issue with men-to-men intimacy, or even saying, hey, I'm bisexual.
Is that reflected in the dating profiles that you see as well? So you're saying that you're having the conversation, which I mean is, I assume, is when you're meeting them for a date. I think it's easier to have that conversation personally, face to face. But do you think that's equally reflected in the dating profiles, or do you think we're not there yet?
I see more profiles where men define themselves as bi-curious or bisexual. If I look at the SDC profiles, which is the most popular platform in the Netherlands right now. But I also believe that lots of couples present themselves as being hetero, as a guy, and not being open about it. So also with a recent play session that we had, I had a conversation with a guy, and he was kind of approaching the topic really carefully around saying, hey, how do you, how comfortable are you with intimacy? And that was his way of kind of signaling that he was actually bisexual. He didn't come out saying, hey, I'm bisexual, period. Being afraid that would scare away other couples.
Do you see kind of bisexuality or play in clubs? Do you see that very often, or is that still pretty rare here in the Netherlands, in your opinion?
I think it is pretty rare. So what you would sometimes see is maybe some men kissing each other, or maybe a little, some hand jobs, and if it's a dark room, maybe some blowjobs. But actually, bisex is not that common. Mm-hmm. I do have some gay friends. It's a lovely couple of two men who are non-monogamous, and they have their gay parties that they go to, which are, I hear their stories, and those are incredible parties.
You get jealous about when they tell you all the stories about how open everybody is.
Well, I mean, if you have parties of 2,000 persons in a 2,000-person orgy, yes, that is, I think, something that we can learn from as a swinger community. I think in general, the gay community is leading the path of talking about consent, about safer sex.
Mm-hmm. Testing.
Definitely. Yeah, fashion as well. So you see also some trends, especially for male fashion. It's drawing inspiration from the gay scene. So that's also something I've seen is less boring clothes for men.
Oh, yeah. I'm a big fan. I always tell gentlemen in the lifestyle, if you want to get some really classy, fresh style, designer, trendy jocks, to immediately go to a gay store, because those are the best. For starters, they're colourful, because most men's jocks in the standard, they're like navy blue, black, off you go. That's all you need. Have a great life. Whereas I think gay men they've just got it nailed down. They're like, okay, if I'm going to go to a 2,000 person orgy and I take my pants off, I want to have a bit of pizzazz. I don't want to walk in there with my navy, standard trunks. So I agree with that.
Yeah, and otherwise, I think especially in the going to swingers clubs in the Netherlands, it's still a different world from the gay or bisexual scene. But I think it's the boundaries are blurring. Also with the erotic parties, is blurring more and more.
To close this out then, would you say that the Netherlands, that Dutch people approach sex entirely different than anybody else? Would you say that they're more open? Would you say that they're more focused on maybe down to fuck? Would you say they want to dance more? Like, if you were going to wrap it up in a nice, neat bow with what you see in the clubs here, how would you explain that to somebody listening for the first time?
I think the Dutch really have an attitude to fun and dancing. So the Dutch have an excellent electronic dance music scene, and you really see this infusing also the swingers clubs. So there's lots of movement, dancing, and fun. That's, I think, really key, and also helps it to have easier connections with other people if you go out to a swingers club in the Netherlands.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Dutchie, for joining us today. Again, I do want to give a shout out, give a mention to Mrs. Dutchie. She's not here. She is lovely. Thank you very much for joining us, talking about the cultural differences, talking about your experiences. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.